Extempers, speech debaters, and everyone else listening to this podcast. I'm YuYu, one of your co-hosts of the Half Hour Extemp podcast, and that's
Spencer. Let's go.
As you can see, if you watched our last episode, we are in the same attire, and I just realized that my shirt matches the background of this wall, but that is because we have revamped. This is the second official episode of our, I guess, third season is what you can call it. We took like a really long hiatus, but we're back and we're better than ever, and we have a strong schedule, so we don't, laze around and not actually record episodes that we're supposed to recording.
I mean, it's really nice because I have a job. That means we can be flexible, right? And it's like you still in college, still dealing with a college life, right? But that means that you can because I have a bit more flexibility. You can just be like, hey, when are you good? And I'm gonna be like, anytime, well, not except for when I work, of course, but that's besides the point.
No, he records episodes during work.
Yep. You'll see me in my cubicle at one point in time, and it'll be pretty funny.
Okay, well, back to business. As you can tell from the title of this episode, history was made a couple weeks ago. Or actually, not even a couple weeks ago. This literally happened like last week. Honestly, it felt like such a fever dream. I can't even keep track of time anymore. But Speaker McCarthy is no longer Speaker McCarthy. He got ousted. And on top of that, government shutdown, question mark? So I think if you're living in the United States and you keep up with US news, you're probably like, what the heck is happening in our Congress right now? Like, are we even stable, right? And I think we'll try to answer these questions. We don't have like solid answers for you, but we can tell you what happened.
This is such a wild story. Honestly, I don't even think I could have called this. And we were talking about this last episode. I have a degree in political science now, so and I'm pretty I've been pretty accurate on this podcast about what things are going to look like for the most part. This was just not going to happen. Calling this as calling Speaker McCarthy now being former Speaker McCarthy, not even into its whole term, is wild. So this is a really interesting moment in U.S. history, and there's going to be 150 extemp questions about this, and that is just a guarantee. So great topic today, and you get to hear more about Kevin McCarthy. We already have an episode about him. It was 43 or 42 or something like that. So
like that.
It was pretty recent. It was at the top of this year. Think about it. He didn't even make 1 year as speaker.
9 months.
9 months,
at the
man.
time. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
I think I might have remained consistent with my view. I was pretty negative about it. I didn't think he was gonna last, because no way. But I could be wrong. So don't quote me on it. Just listen to the episode, and if we're wrong, then I'm sorry. But today we are right. Because it just happened.
Yeah. This happened from this date. It'll be about 2.5 weeks when this episode is uploaded. So, just for your information.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I should say not last week, as in last week from the date that this episode is posted. Yeah. Last week, as in right now, it's October 7th.
Yes. All right. You want to jump right? Do we want to jump right into this? Let's talk about some Kevin McCarthy again. As boy, oh boy, is he a story and a half. And I have to be honest, before we even begin this, I kind of feel bad for McCarthy in some way, because this is ridiculous. Imagine being at the forefront of American history. Imagine just all of this crap happening, and all of a sudden it's just oh, you're the first one, haha, sucker. It likely won't be the last either, if I had to make a good guess at this point now. But let's jump into my background information, because let's be honest, the story and quite frankly, still the story of the looming government shutdown, shows the spotlight to be on Kevin McCarthy. And even as we go into the need to work on coming up with funding for the government, Kevin McCarthy is in fact the spotlight of the whole thing. Since even before becoming the Speaker of the House, Speaker McCarthy has struggled with Republican division. This is an occurrence seen from nearly all previous Republican speakers, such as John Boehner and Paul Ryan. These are two really good people to look at. Both of them have explained how they have struggled with Republican division. At one point in time, actually, all three of these previous speakers, I believe, were seen as the new faces of the Republican Party. All three of them have something in common, and it is they have struggled. I could be corrected on that statement because I believe there could be somebody different than John Boehner. But essentially, the Republican Party at one point in time had new faces of the Republican Party, and those new faces are all basically exiled from the party. The starting point of this conversation is one that happened quite literally, well, about a week now before this episode was even recorded. Congress averted a shutdown nearly 3 hours before one had occurred. And this bill only funds the government until November 17th, which was a total of 47 days. Let alone the fact that right now the House adjourned for a week after they ousted McCarthy as a speaker. So they're not even doing anything about the government bills that are really important to fund our country. At risk of losing the speakership, which is now more like because he lost the speakership, McCarthy relied on Democrats to help pass the bill. The Senate then followed by passing the bill. And it was by pretty good margins. I believe I've got the votes here in a moment. But the focus of this episode is not on that government shutdown. We did not design this to be talking about the government shutdown. This is for an episode at a later date, if one occurs. And it could be possible that one of those might happen. Or we'll be talking about the government funding bill, because it's now a very big topic here. McCarthy's statement after the passing of the bill was brutally honest. He said, quote, "We're going to do our job. We're going to be adults in the room, and we're going to keep the government open." That's a pretty fair statement, if you ask me. Hey, that's one of Congress's most fundamental jobs, that power of the purse. We have to keep the government open. This led to the bill passing the House by a vote of 335 to 91 and the Senate by a vote of 88 to 9. So, pretty reasonable margins. Adding to his statement, McCarthy noted that if somebody wants to remove me because I want to be the adult in the room, go ahead and try. This quote is more than certainly aimed at the hardline Republicans. And obviously he did get removed because he was the adult in the room. And they did go ahead and tried. And they were successful. McCarthy had been warned by several Republicans prior to this not to fall to the Democrats. One example of this was Representative Ralph Norman, who called this bill a surrender to the Democrats from McCarthy. And just to note this, the spending bill was completed on Friday, September 29th, which was the day before the last day that the government could possibly shut down. But McCarthy did not put forth the bill until 11 hours later. This was in part by Republicans after a 90-minute meeting to put forth this proposal and push spending across. McCarthy did a total 180, as originally he was not supportive of this short-term funding bill. So it basically happened rather quickly, and McCarthy's change of mind was because of pushback from Republicans in his own party. As we are here to talk about, there is obvious division in the Republican Party, and McCarthy is in fact struggling with it. Well, was in fact struggling with it. A number of Republicans stood in support of the short-term spending bill. However, the hardliners may now have the opportunity to push McCarthy out of his. Well, they did push McCarthy out of his speakership. I wrote this before all of this happened, so thank you for bearing with me as I make my edits live on the podcast. One thing I will note here, adding on to this, one of the biggest things that did change when McCarthy became speaker was the hardline Republicans asked for it to be changed to one vote to potentially remove a speaker. And that was put forth by Matt Gaetz, and YuYu will talk about that here in a moment. But YuYu, we knew that McCarthy was going to struggle. I think that's a pretty fair statement. I don't think we expected him not to last as speaker. And that became a very interesting topic very quickly this year. And honestly, it took just one 180 to do something that he thought was right for him to go.
It's crazy. It really is. I think I'm like looking back on our episode, literally like 2 episodes ago, just because we took like a really long hiatus, about talking about this and then kind of listening to discussions of it now really, really comes full circle. And I don't know, I think the best way to put it is just like McCarthy messed up. Like he did not do his term justice. And he didn't really know how to handle both sides, but still be a Speaker of the House and be an effective Speaker of the House. Because I think prior to this, we see on like TikTok and we also see on like news channels that Congress wasn't conducting a lot of the things that they needed to conduct. Like they were literally talking about aliens, well, not really figuring out a solution for the bill, for the like the budget. And now like we're at this moment a time where speakership is so uncertain and we don't really know what's the next step for the house. And I think that could be a really scary time. But let's talk about that a little bit more in depth, right? Like who is targeting McCarthy, why, and like also like why did this happen, etc. So yes, Spencer is correct. Representative Matt Gaetz is the one that ended up targeting McCarthy and called the motion to vacate last week. But other hardline Republicans were also very supportive of this measure, and it ended up being that like 8 Republicans was the deciding vote in having like the majority to vacate Representative McCarthy as Speaker of the House. So it was really, really, really close margins. And the only reason why it happened was because all of the Democrats had voted in line with the 8 Republicans to remove McCarthy. And so that gives you an indication of how tenuous it was, and how like close it also was, and what this necessarily means for us as like people with these representatives in Congress right now. So while these motion to vacate could be called by one person, the resolution could have been blocked if members decided to table the vote, which would also need a simple majority vote in order to agree to table the vote. But if that block failed, then they must vote on it. There was another scenario where Democrats could have just outright said no, like we're not going to vacate him. But it ended up being that House Democrats agreed unanimously to oust McCarthy. So just to give you some context, like right now, the Republican and Democrat divide in Congress is 221 seats to 212 seats, respectively. So, again, like very close margins already. You really needed all the support of the Democrats or all the support of the Republicans in order to do one or the other. So I don't know. I just think it's like a crazy time in history. That's why I keep repeating it. And like, it's crazy that it happened regardless. But why did it happen? So NPR reports that Gates or any combination of McCarthy detractors could at any time introduce a privilege resolution to declare the office of the Speaker of the House of Representatives vacant, or also known as a motion to vacate. And this was in the episode that we talked about in episode 43, where Representative McCarthy had made a lot of concessions to hardline Republicans that like incorporated the only needing one person to have a motion to vacate in order for the vote to be called. And so I'm not saying that he made his own bed, but he kind of made his own bed by allowing that to happen and allowing only one Republican being needed in order to call that motion to vacate. If they had agreed like they needed 10 or they needed a simple majority in order to call the motion to vacate, things would have been a lot different. But that concession was a really big part in why this ended up happening the way that it did. Analysts also believe that since McCarthy had to deal with so many unprecedented issues for Speaker of the House prior to that, this was just inevitable and he was going to be vacated. And it wasn't a matter of like if he was going to be vacated, it's a matter of like when he was going to be vacated. So there is also that. And again, like prior to us really understanding that McCarthy was just going to be ousted the week before we were going to record this. I had copied and pasted something from NPR saying, with a narrow 4-seat majority, only a sliver of the GOP conference could vacate the speakership if the 212 Democrats vote en masse to defeat any blocking motion and then in favor of the resolution to vacate. And we did see that happen, which was really shocking. Some Democrats were really unhappy with the speaker and McCarthy's inability to get votes in order, but would like to also like know concretely who would have been replacing McCarthy. However, in a turn of events, McCarthy was not willing to just negotiate with the Democrats and actually call on the Democrats to help him maintain his speakership. As you can see from like AOC's own interpretation of what happened, and also I think his name is Jeff Jackson from North Carolina, their interpretation of what was going on as people part of the Democratic caucus understand that McCarthy did not really reach out to them. So they really didn't have any ability to back him up or even make any concessions so that they would be able to back him up. Um, and you can see this also from like Pramila Jayapal, the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, saying that timing is important and really they don't know who the Republicans were going to put forward after ousting McCarthy. And it would have been really helpful to have an understanding of who was going to replace McCarthy if that ended up being the case. So even now, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries stated prior to the motion to vacate that they haven't really given any thought about how to handle a hypothetical motion to vacate. And they're really just focused on making sure that they can avoid extreme MAGA Republican takeover of Congress and like a shutdown, obviously. But then afterwards, Representative Jeffries released a statement prior to the vote that, quote, it is now the responsibility of the GOP members to end the House Republican Civil War. Given their unwillingness to break from MAGA extremism in an authentic and comprehensive manner, the House Democratic leadership will vote yes on the pending Republican motion to vacate the chair. He also cited that McCarthy was distrustful and unwilling to make any concessions to the Democratic Party. And from the repeated pattern of this type of behavior, Republicans ended up siding together and unanimously deciding to vote to oust him from his seat. But again, I'm going to emphasize that Republicans have no idea who's going to be the next Speaker of the House because they haven't had an agreement. And because there are slim margins, the Republicans, all of them, need to agree unanimously in order to get that speakership out there. And so if these 8 people aren't happy with the Speaker of the House choice that Republicans have chosen, it's not going to pass because Democrats will never, ever, ever like be willing to vote for that speaker, especially if they're a Republican. Right now, Democrats are still set on voting for Representative Hakeem Jeffries to be the Speaker of the House, and he has the support of all 212 Democrats. And now Hakeem Jeffries and the Democratic Party are trying to reach out to more moderate Republicans, with Jeffries stating, quote, "At this point, we simply need Republican partners willing to break with MAGA extremism, reform the highly partisan House rules that were adopted at the beginning of this Congress, and join us in finding common ground for the people." So he's really hoping for a bipartisan governing coalition, is what he calls it, in order to form so that they can make sure these state Republicans and hardline Republicans don't have this type of control over the House and over the speakership. So yeah, quite complicated, quite a mess. Wouldn't you say, Spencer?
Yeah, I like this. This just something. In all honesty, you say it right. It's shocking. We've never seen this before. Obviously, in the entirety of this history, it's been 110 years since a vote to vacate the speaker has even happened. And you're right. He made his own bed. And the thing is like you can't like say you could have seen it coming because I don't think anybody really would have seen this coming. But because of the because of what he gave up for the speakership, I guess it was a little bit more obvious than we originally thought. And personally, that's where I side with at this moment, even though I didn't know at the time.
Yeah. I think if you really want like a further breakdown of what was going on in the House when this vote was called, I would definitely recommend watching um, Representative Jeff Jackson's TikTok on this. He gives a really solid breakdown. He gives a really solid breakdown of what is going on in Congress at the time. I think he's really known for that now as his like personality, but he gives a really good breakdown of what had happened, what Republicans were think or what Republicans were doing, and also what Democrats were thinking at the time. AOC's Instagram Live also has a really good breakdown of what exactly happened, and I encourage you to watch those.
All right, let's jump into the question. Our question today is: should Democrats have rescued Kevin McCarthy's speakership? So, based off of what you just said, 212 Democrats in the House of Representatives, all of them voted to oust him of speakership, along with the 8 hardline Republicans, or was it 6? It was one. It was 6 hardline Republicans that voted to oust him out of his speakership. And it's a very interesting question because McCarthy gave up or sided with the Democrats and with the Republicans to keep the government open. So this is actually a phenomenal question. You will go ahead and give you a start.
Yeah, so I think you'll find articles for both sides ultimately for this question, whether or not Democrats should have rescued Kevin McCarthy's speakership and ranging from a number of issues. I think what you could say to this question is that Democrats, from the perspective and from like the benefit of Democrats as a party, shouldn't have rescued Kevin McCarthy's speakership, and they should have, as a coalition, agreed collectively to oust him of his speakership position. And that's for a couple of reasons. I think the first clearest reason is that Speaker McCarthy wasn't like meeting the promises of his claims. He had said that he would, be really hard on Trump and run or basically say that like he didn't want Trump to just be able to get away with what he did with January 6th insurrection and with a bunch of illegal things that Trump ended up doing and is now being prosecuted for. But then at the same time, after he made that promise to Democrats, went to Mar-a-Lago, talked to Trump and asked for forgiveness, and really being really flip-floppy with certain issues that he promised Democrats that he would side with them on, and then repeatedly going back over his claims and not really meeting these expectations that he had already set for himself. So again, making his own bed, nailing his own coffin. But another thing about this, surprisingly enough, and probably not surprisingly enough, is that there are articles out there saying Democrats should have done this because it will jeopardize House Republicans' election chances coming up in the next election. And the reason being is it shows really how split Republicans are and not being able to handle the House. Whereas Democrats can be unanimous, can work together. It shows that they are willing to negotiate and agree to get things done and to get things passed. Really emphasizing these differences and these disparities in what a Democrat owned house can do versus what a Republican owned house can do, which really isn't much in the past months that Speaker McCarthy was Speaker of the House. So it does seem like Democrats have an edge in the upcoming elections and being able to control the House and having more Democrats being elected simply because of this whole fiasco that was going on. Um, However, you could also say that Democrats should have rescued Kevin McCarthy's speakership simply because of the looming government shutdown. The bill that they passed is only lasting 45 days until they ultimately have to make a decision on the bill. Like Spencer said, they recessed. So Democrats and Republicans are out of the House in their own districts doing district stuff and not focusing on the budget. While they probably are like in their own time focusing on ways to agree and ways to pass the budget bill, this is still a big question and it hasn't been resolved. This is why Speaker McCarthy rushed to pass the bill before he was ultimately ousted. And this was why, like, this was such a big concern among constituents, but also among House representatives as well. So there are like multiple perspectives, I'd say, that you could take and multiple answers that you could have to this question. But I know Spencer also has like a lot of ideas to this as well.
I mean, this is a complicated question with a complicated answer. That's the only real way to put it. Is like, this question is. I like this question, but I hate this question. Like, it's a good question in the fact that, like, 212, right, could have done something. It's a good question because they could have. I mean, he made a deal. He's trying to make it happen. But it's an annoying question because it's like, honestly, if you're the Democratic Party, what do you do? I think this goes a couple of different ways. I don't totally agree with the election chances. I've expressed that before in podcasts before, that some things bolster elections better than others. Why, like, the fact that Democrats agreed with hardline Republicans to me doesn't make sense why Democrats would gain. I get that the point is to show that the Republican Party was split, right? But if Democrats are trying to gain election chances, a very fair argument here is, why would you side with the hardline Republicans when your point is that the hardline Republicans are the one that are split? And I don't like that point of view personally or just personally speaking. I think that's a really bad take for Democrats. If I was to answer this question, though, I would say that the answer is yes. I think Democrats. Let me make sure I'm reading this question right. Should Democrats have rescued? The answer should be no. No, they shouldn't have. And part of the role of the speaker is to make those concessions. And it's a very trusted responsibility. And Kevin McCarthy just didn't do that from the reports. As a matter of fact, before the vote happened, there's a report I was watching from NBC News. If I find it by the time this is published, I will link it. But basically, there was a meeting that happened in closed doors. There was a Democratic caucus session, and they showed a video of Kevin McCarthy bashing Democrats real hard as speaker. And the point of that video was to say that he has not done anything for our party. And it's a very valid point here. They were not happy with his speakership. And, like, your whole background here, YuYu, is honestly the answer to this question. No, they shouldn't have. They should not have rescued his speakership because he wasn't doing anything good for their party. And the speaker isn't helping that party, then what is the point of having him as speaker for us? Okay, so that's what Democrats are thinking. Honestly, he hasn't done much. The only thing that he did was side with Democrats of quick funding bill. Let's go. That's all he did. And for Democrats' point of view, that's not good enough, which is a very fair argument. And yeah, I would think that Democrats were smart to not rescue him. He made his own coffin. He created the situation he was in. And yes, they were trying to show that divide, but I don't think that bolsters election chances. Like I said, I just don't agree with those articles very much. But extempers, you take that with what you want. Um, Short and sweet of it, no, they shouldn't have. Like, if they're not doing anything, if he didn't do anything for their party, yeah, I can see why all 212 went. It's a pretty straightforward answer in my opinion. They were right to just oust him. They were probably going to vote that way anyway, if I had to guess based off of party divides. So even if it was failed, you probably would have seen all 212 anyway, even if they had good stuff from McCarthy.
Yeah, I think like even prior to Pelosi, former Speaker of the House, not being ousted but stepping down after Democrats lost the midterm elections, um, it had said to Hakeem Jeffries and expressed to the Democratic Party that they shouldn't like they shouldn't save McCarthy because he has done nothing for Democrats and he has continually gone back on his promises and not be an active negotiator with the Democrats. And so if you're pandering only to your own party and you're pandering to the hardline Republicans that have your fate on the line, it's just not a good look for you as like a Speaker of the House. And I think like a lot of the comments that Democrats have talked about or have made express similar sentiments to that. And yeah, I think like personally, I would agree with Spencer's answers that I don't think Democrats should have bailed him out, and they didn't. And like we see why. And I think that's a perfectly fine answer to have. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this question was very simple. Like it's a very
It
complicated question, but it's very simple to answer because all these articles that are being published about McCarthy's speakership does not side with McCarthy. Like
Yeah, this is just such a this is just such an obvious no, don't rescue, because like if he hasn't done anything for your party, then what's the point? Like you're of course you don't want him as speaker. Duh. Like it's I mean, not to say duh in like an obvious way, but like duh, the party's going to like if I'm in the Democratic Party, I'm going to be like duh, he's not done crap for us, right? Um, the idea, though, is I think if you were to take yes here, I think the argument is you would have sided with hardline Republicans, which makes you look bad as a party. And I think that's a very fair yes answer. I don't see Democrats wanting to do that very often. And most times, hardline Republicans and Democrats don't agree. So, why would you ever want to take a stance that agrees with this group of people? Especially if it can put you on the line for your election. Hey, some of these Democrats might be in very competitive districts, which is probably true. So imagine a progressive Democrat in a competitive Democratic district saying that they voted alongside with a hardline Republican. That, in my opinion, that puts some of these Democrats that are there now in more difficult election chances. And they may lose to a progressive Democrat, which they may not want to have that kind of progressive Democrat in Congress. And it could, in fact, lead to a division within the Democratic Party. So it gets it gets a little complicated. If you were to answer yes, you have to think very futuristic. as we talked about with the last episode, sometimes simple answers are the best. The simple answer here is no. If you wanted to go with that complicated answer of let's envision what the future is with the Democratic Party after this vote, I would go with a yes. And you have to really think about what that impact is of siding with hardline Republicans. And I think that's the fair yes answer there is how does that look for the Democratic Party siding with the most conservative group or this Freedom Caucus that we talk about often?
Yeah, and I think like from both of our answers, we're clearly thinking about this question in the context of what is most beneficial for Democrats, and not necessarily like anything else. But you could also evaluate it with a different perspective as well. Like, should Democrats have rescued Kevin McCarthy's speakership for the benefit of the government shutdown or for the benefit of like agreeing with and working with Republicans? Like, I think you could take multiple interpretations of what the benefit slash the harms would be in ousting McCarthy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in the context of like, is this good for the Democratic Party or not? Fruit for thought there. I think I like offered a couple of answers that you could take. Um, but yeah, I don't really think I have anything else to add. Do you?
Yeah, I don't really have much to add here. I think take this one easy. Vote no. Say
Well,
no. Um, vote no to the resolution on Democrats saving Kevin McCarthy's speakership. Let's go. What I really mean by that is I would go with the no answer. Like, first off, it's going to save you a much easier time reading through sources. Being totally fair, like if you're going to go yes, you have to go deep into sources and you have to give really good analysis here. Like we were talking about in the previous episode, maybe that yes answer is that more advanced. You've been doing this for a couple of years, kind of thing. But we also should give that advice of this is also a yes answer that I don't think a lot of the national speakers would give here, because the no is just so simple. The party didn't like him. The party wasn't pleased by it, and the party didn't gain anything from it. Yeah, this is a no. Like, if you don't know the KISS method, which is keep it simple, stupid. Hey, this is an example of keep it simple, stupid. Go right with the easy answer.
go with what you know, go with what you're comfortable with. It's just easier to speak when you understand the complexities. So if you do, like, we're not going to stop you, go right ahead if you have that type of analysis ready. But if you don't, and if you think the easiest answer is to just say no, like, say no. You don't
Yeah.
always have to flex your knowledge.
Don't go overboard with it, right? Like I said, this season I'm trying to prevent my theory a bit, right? If I was because I know a lot of the political theory, I might go with that yes answer. But if you don't know that theory, just go no. It's
Mhm.
so easy, and you're probably gonna get more sourcing that says no than yes. But there
Yeah.
is a good, like you said, there is a good balance on the yes and no here.
Yeah. Yeah. This could be a debate resolution, Loki. But it's probably not going to be because it's a bit contentious at the moment.
The
Uh,
the debate resolution you use should honestly be about making an amendment to speakership. So
yeah, yeah, probably. Um, I don't know. It'll probably be reflected in next year's topics, but this year's topics have already been.
yeah,
So, um,
interesting stuff.
yeah, yeah, it is. It is. US politics is crazy now. I never used to want to talk about domestic extent because it's always crazy and people have
The,
very strong opinions. So I always stayed safe with international.
this one's just fascinating, honestly. Like there's like nothing like totally bad about this. Like, well, there's a bunch bad about the topic, but it's very fascinating in a way that's like we should talk about this. It's very unique, and we didn't expect to see this one coming. Well,
Well,
he did make his bet, so
we did, but like
we did,
everyone
but we
shook
didn't.
anyway.
Anyway,
Oh, yeah. So extempers. bitch innovators, and everyone else listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for listening as we get back into the grind of things and producing regular weekly episodes. We appreciate you listening, and we appreciate that you are taking your time and taking care in researching. So I hope you get the one in the round. If you don't, that's okay too. We believe that you made it to finals if you listen to this episode. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to ask either me or Spencer on Instagram. Our handles are right there. If you don't feel comfortable reaching out to us personally, feel free to DM us on Instagram at the Half Hour Extemp podcast. We'll probably do a bunch of Q&As. I do want to increase our social media engagement. I think that will help us with viewership. And also make sure to follow us on Twitter at the Half Hour. Our YouTube is also the Half Hour, and you should definitely subscribe and ring the bell. Our episodes are posted earlier on our YouTube channel prior to posting on OneClap as a podcast format. So you can still listen to us in the background as you're like driving or doing your homework. You just don't have to see our faces when you're listening to our YouTube videos.
Make sure if you're going to do that, you should probably have the YouTube Premium though. No advertisement for YouTube.
I put my phone down, like I just close the screen. And not close the screen. I just kind of like. I like put the screen down. I don't even hit the close button. But if you want to opt out of buy YouTube Premium, your video will stay open. So there's that. And yeah, so I think I covered all our bases. Please keep up with us. And I will, and Spencer will, we will see you next week.
Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you all later. I almost lost my train of thought. Bye.